Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Floodlights. It's been about 7 months since I've done a video. One of those reasons is that I started a podcast with a friend of mine, and I will link it below in case you're interested. I was going to give up on these videos. I was actually gonna erase the whole channel, thinking that I wasn't gonna do anymore. But since our podcast is about 45 minutes, and there are some things that I just want to talk about that are less than 10 minutes, I decided to start up with the videos again. So I know my glasses are glaring there. I'm going to get new ones that won't glare. So I wanted to talk today about a couple verses in Romans. I've been starting to read the Bible a lot more, and then I picked up a book called Sparkling Gems. It's ginormous. It's like this big. It's over there, but I won't get it. It's huge, and it's a daily devotional, but it goes into the Greek meaning behind the words, which is really cool, because as you know, the Bible has been translated several times, and I am not a conspiracy theorist in the sense of like thinking that it has purposely been changed, but you have to admit that humans are humans, and sometimes, like, the English language is not very deep, honestly. As a linguist, like, we tend to go for, like, the easiest words or the most, I don't know, commonly used phrase or something in English. We're kind of lazy in our use of language. So I'm not going to get into Greek at all. Maybe someday, but not today. I'm kind of a nerd like that. I think that it's interesting. So Romans 12:10 through 15. Be devoted to one another with authentic brotherly affection as members of one family. Give preference to one another in honor. So you're supposed to prefer, like, honor those around you before you honor yourself. I think we've heard that one before. Never lagging behind in diligence, aglow in the spirit, enthusiastically serving the Lord. Constantly rejoicing in hope because of our confidence in Christ. Steadfast and patient in distress, devoted to prayer, continually seeking wisdom, guidance, and strength. Contributing to the needs of God's people, pursuing the practice of hospitality. Bless those who persecute you, who cause you harm or hardship. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, sharing others' joy, and weep with those who weep, sharing others' grief. So I read this from the Amplified Version. Again, there are several translations in the Bible, of the Bible, honestly. So when I say something like, let's see an example, pursuing you have in parentheses, like, word, the meaning behind those words, and they're taking it from the Greek, like expanding the meaning for us English speakers. So it's like the brotherly affection, in parentheses it says as members of one family. So it's like expanding the meaning behind brotherly to make sure you really understand, like, he's talking about treating people like they are your family. Because as humans, we tend to treat our family members better than, our friends or acquaintances, and that's normal. It's totally fine. Like, everyone has their tribe. It's ancient. That's how we are. But Paul is trying to say, like, is it Paul or Peter? See, I'm not a theologian, guys. But he's trying to say, treat each other in the church as though they're your brother. And that should give you some pause as to how you treat that person, like as your sister. Well, sometimes we can get kind of contentious in our families, but just, keep it in mind. It's the people at your church, your fellow Christians, even somebody around the world, you should feel like an affinity towards them, Anyway, so that was the Amplified Version. I know in my Proverbs series, I pretty much read from the Message version. What I found really interesting, I was going to do this from the Living Bible, but in verse 14 in the Living Bible, it said, bless those who persecute you because you're a Christian. And then I couldn't find that in any other version. And honestly, I have to look it up and see, like, why would they put that in there? Persecute you because you're a Christian, whereas every other version says bless those who persecute you. And that brings, like, a different meaning, right? So blessing those who persecute you Sorry, I can't stand that glare. Blessing those who persecute you in general is like a whole different thing than blessing those who persecute you because you're a Christian. Like, that could be different, right? So you could then make excuses for not blessing somebody or not loving your enemy if they persecute you because of, let's say, your political beliefs, like these days. And I really see no proof of that. With every other translation, it is bless those who persecute you, love your enemies as yourself. So I'm not sure what the Living Bible was doing with that translation. So I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I'm not going to say that I read it. I use it for other things. Verse 15 is what I really wanted to hit on today because it kind of hit me. Like, it says, rejoice with those who rejoice, sharing others' joy. That's in the parentheses. And weep with those who weep, sharing others' grief. And this hit me because I don't know about you, but I'm the type of person who doesn't really like crying. That goes into like a whole lot of childhood issues and family issues or whatever. And yeah, I'm dealing with that. I'm growing, I'm maturing, but I really hate like nonsensical tears. My kids are like, I'm that mom that's like, you're fine, get up, get going. Like, okay, if you're gonna cry, like if you want to cry more, go to your room and cry more. Not when their feelings are hurt, like legitimately. Don't think I'm a terrible mother. Not when they're like bleeding, But if they're like, you can tell the difference between just wanting attention. And I even got to the point these days where I'm like, do you need attention? Okay, do you need a hug? Like, what is really going on here? Because I want my kids to differentiate what's worth crying about and what's worth not worth having a temper tantrum for, and like everyone's going to be annoyed with you and they're just gonna want you to leave. Like, I don't want them to be that kid or that adult. When adults cry, honestly, it still kind of like makes me uncomfortable. I don't cry a whole lot. My husband doesn't cry a whole lot, like ever. We just don't cry a lot. We're not criers, and it's funny because like Spaniards are almost as emotional as Latin Americans, but they're like passionate, not like criers. So anyway, so this hit me because it's like, rejoice with those who rejoice. I've been battling with this for like years. I remember when I first got my first book published, it was years ago, and it was with honestly a publisher that collapsed and like had a lot of issues, and people sued them, and like they didn't do what they were supposed to do, so my book never got out. But the day that I got the news, I called who I thought was my best friend, and there was like silence on the other end of the line, and it hurt. Like, it hurts when somebody doesn't really want to rejoice with you when you're rejoicing. That's always stuck with me. I can't say that I'm perfect about this. Of course there are times that like jealousy is like, and it hits you and you kind of want to bash the person or whatever. Obviously, the more you grow with Jesus and want to follow his example, he was not like that at all. So I want to get better. I am growing, now, even if I feel jealousy, I'm able to like rejoice. I'm not super like bubbly either, so you gotta catch me on a good day to be like, oh my gosh, but I will like rejoice with you. And if I don't, like, it will hit me and it'll convict me. But then it goes on to say, weep with those who weep, share each other's grief. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I know that, like, women are more emotional than men. And so when you're in a women's Bible group, there are times that you're worshiping. I've been in some where we start with worship, and worship is a funny thing because when you come into like what we call like the throne room, God's throne room, and you just come and you want to worship, like sometimes you cry. And some women who are very emotional, they can sound like they're weeping, and they're just like overawed and overjoyed to be worshiping God. I never knew that before this year, probably. I think it's pretty awesome. I do have to admit that, like, God opened the floodgates on my eyes. Like, let's see, how many years ago now? Like 6 years ago, I was at a conference and I was resisting crying. But because of a lot of things that I didn't want to deal with and I needed to deal with. And so my way of crying is just like tears kind of streaming down. I'm not loud. I don't like to be loud. I don't like people knowing that I'm crying. Like, I'm still very like, leave me alone. I'm doing my thing, you know? So, but everyone's different. But then when people are actually feeling grief, what I've noticed in the last few months, because I lost my grandfather and I lost my grandmother just recently, and they were so precious to me. And I know that they're in a better place. I know that they were getting to the point where they didn't really want to be here. They were 95. They had, they were fairly healthy, but they couldn't really leave their house that much. We were having a hard time, all of us grandchildren, getting to see them because we have now their great-grandchildren. And they were just kind of ready to move on. And so that I'm at peace with that. I'm at peace with them. But there's still a grief to go through. And what I notice is, and hear me out, I don't blame anyone for this because this is kind of how I react before reading this verse, like literally a few days ago. So people will say these things, you know, this is part of life, and I get it. Yeah, absolutely it is. You know, she's in a better place. I agree, you know. But at the same time, I think that what we expect as humans, and maybe too much as Christians, we expect for the crying to stop at that point. And I think our over-obsession with the crying stopping, I think that shows that we believe in the back of our heads, you know, that when the crying stops, it means that you have comforted the person. And that, like, I marinated on that for a while because it hit me because I'm the person that wants the crying to stop, right? So this is, you know, like, I need to reflect on this in my own life as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as a sister, as a friend. What is my obsession about with wanting people to cry? To stop crying, sorry. Why can't I let them cry? And of course it had to happen to me before I would even, you know, like it even like popped up into my head. But this is so human of us, you know. But I just noticed like people just didn't, first of all, nobody knows what to say when there's a death, right? So I get that. I blame nobody. But then it's like nobody really wants you to cry. They want you to dry your tears, and that to them means that they comforted you. You know, like we're so selfish as humans. But that's me too. Like if I say something to somebody and they stop crying, I want them to stop crying because it shows me like that's my the fruit of my labor, right? Like I did that. I comforted you. Now your tears are all gone and you're good. And my husband and I were talking about it with his father because his father's gone through a lot this year, being diagnosed with cancer and having to go through treatments and transplants, and a lot has happened. And we've kind of focused on telling him to be grateful, which is obviously we all have to be grateful. But we haven't, and this is a criticism on us as the kids, like we haven't allowed him to mourn and to have his grief. And yes, he's still alive, you know, obviously, but it's a big deal to have gone through this stuff. And honestly, this just sort of hit me as I'm marinating on this verse and how it has affected me with my grandparents passing and no one really wanting to talk about it. And, you know, it's really not anyone else. It's nobody's fault, really. I'm just sort of looking at a pattern in the church. Like we want, yes, you need to be grateful. Yes, I am grateful that my grandparents were awesome and that I had an awesome life with them. But that doesn't relieve like just the like, oh my gosh, they're not around anymore. I know where they are, but there's a period of grief of just like, oh, my grandparents aren't around. You know, not like, I don't get it all emotional right now. But it's okay, like learning for myself that it's okay to mourn and to grieve, but also that it's okay for others, and that I shouldn't be so obsessed with getting people to stop crying because they should grieve. And in fact, it says, weep with those who weep. Like, oh, you're actually supposed to feel their pain to the point where you sit down with them and you just let the tears come out. Like, you're not supposed to, like, awkwardly pat. You're not supposed to, oh, I'm so sorry, but they're in a better place. And, like, again, there's nothing wrong with saying that. But on the other hand, like, if somebody's just grieving, you're supposed to just be able to sit with them in that grief. Ask them if they want something. Ask them if, like, can I cry with you? Now, that's weird to me. It's so anti my personality. But that's what we're supposed to do. As much as we're supposed to rejoice with those who rejoice, we're supposed to weep with those who weep. So I don't know about you. I'm sure I've read this verse before. I'm sure it's been, like, talked about before, because it's like, be devoted to one another, how we're supposed to be treating each other. But I honestly haven't heard anyone, like, really hit home how anti-cultural we're supposed to be on this. Like, even our culture, like, it's not just the church, but everyone wants, if you stop crying, then, like, okay, you're supposed to, you have had comfort that person. But it's just not true. Like, you're supposed to allow humans to go through the emotions of things. I've already talked too long. I'm going to let it go. In case you're interested in the podcast that I'm doing with my friend, it is not video at all. It's just audio. It's called The Darkroom Dialogue. It's on iTunes. It's on Spreaker. I'll link it below in case anyone is still watching, because I've been gone for so long. But anyway, see you guys later.